Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game that's been around for more than a decade or two, and has over 10,000 cards. Some of them really good, some of them aren't. But there have been tons of really unique cards that have been released throughout the years, and in today's video, we're going to go over some of these in-between and lesser known cards that are found in the depths of Yu-Gi-Oh! Starting off the video is Symbol of Friendship. This is a spell card that is essentially a really complicated search card that embodies the heart of the cards aspect from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. The reason why it's so complicated is its effect, which requires you to draw the card during your draw phase while your opponent controls 3 or more monsters and you control no cards, and then you reveal Symbol of Friendships until your main phase 1. Then you can activate it from your hand to add any one card from your deck to your hand. An effect that's better pulled off in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links with the skill Destiny Draw. Fans of old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Should recognize Symbol of Friendship because the artwork is basically ripped from the anime/manga. The card is based on the friendship symbol of Yugi with his friends drew before his duel against Kaiba while he had the 3 blue ice white dragons on the field, which is why it requires 3 monsters to proc as well. And then through the power of friendship and believe in the heart of the cards and some plot armor, he drew Exodia to win the duel. Anime cards in general don't have the best rap in the TCG. In the anime, the plot relevant cards are typically really strong extra effects, like with Wall Shadow and Labyrinth Wall, which are less than decent monsters, but in the anime had extra effects that didn't really make sense but were really strong. And when they came out to TCG, they were not anything close to special, just 3k walls. Like even Wall Shadow, which was supposed to be the offensive counterpart to Labyrinth Wall, has 1600 attack points, which doesn't quite make sense for a level 7 monster whose gimmick is the offensive counterpart. But most anime cards follow this trend when they're adapted to TCG, where the crazy effects are just not there, or in some cases, the effects are there, but it's either way too strong or just too complicated to see play. And the perfect example to showcase this is Symbol of Friendship being too bad, and number S0 Utopic Zexal being too good. Utopic Zexal, to be brief, is an anime card that features the anime character who plays the Utopia archetype on its artwork, and is on the ban list for being way too good for its own sake. Because with its relatively easy summoning requirements, you can detach a material to have a one-sided lingering floodgate for a turn, meaning your opponent can't activate cards and effects can't be activated that turn. So it basically stops your opponent from playing the game for a whole turn. Now, there are a couple of issues with Symbol of Friendship, despite the fact that being able to search any card from your deck is a great effect. The fact that you have to first draw the card in your draw phase makes it essentially a dead draw if you draw it outside of the draw phase. Then your opponent needs to control at least 3 monsters while you control no cards, meaning you can't have any face downs or anything. Granted, it does let you search any card from your deck, which is a very premium effect that any deck would love to have, but in most cases where the time would come where you would draw a symbol randomly, you probably wouldn't have a field state set up in order to allow it to even resolve its effect. Next up we have Vandalgon, the Dark Dragon Lord. This is a level 8 Dark Dragon type monster with 2800 attack and has the effect that if you negate the activation of opponent's spell, trap, or monster effect with a counter trap card, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand and then activate an effect depending on what type of card was negated. If it was a spell, you inflict 1500 damage to your opponent. Trap cards lets you destroy a card in the field, and if it was a monster, you could just special summon 1 monster from your graveyard. Dalgyon was originally a promo card for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Art manga back in 2005 for Japan and 2009 for the rest of the world. And for its time, it seemed like a pretty cool boss monster, with very intimidating artwork and a name that translated to Funeral March of the Dark Dragon Lord, or Hades' Funeral, which really adds to the Dark Lord theme. Dalgyon also suffers a bit from the same nerf that Symbol of Friendship did, in that originally Dalgyon was a card that originated from the manga and anime, and when it got a TCG version, the effect was changed. Although it definitely wasn't as drastic as Symbol of Friendship. In the manga, the effect, rather than being triggered by specifically a counter trap, was just any trap card that negates the effect of a card. So not the biggest change, but a change nonetheless. As unique of a card as Vandalgon is, especially with its really specific effect with counter traps only, it actually saw competitive play. Specifically within an archetype that was basically built for him, the Counter Fairies. This was an archetype that, like the name implies, was based around fairy monsters that had effects based on counter trap cards that were interestingly enough based on the Greek gods, with different monsters being based on the Greek/Roman gods like Hermes, Perseus, and Zeus. What makes this connection so interesting is with the Counter Fairies boss monster, Voltanus the Adjudicator. See, both cards have not only a similar design, but both have the same attack points and have effects based around the same niche mechanic of counter traps. So it can be said that Dalgyon is almost the dark brother of Voltanus. Now I didn't say evil counterpart because there is actually a Dark Voltanus card that exists which has a similar counter trap effect. Another interesting design fact is that Vandalgon has a rival card of sorts, which is Tualatin, a level 8 fairy monster which has the same stat line as Dalgyon, and it has a similar effect to special summon itself when a specific condition is met. In the case of Tualatin, it's if your opponent destroys 2 of your monsters during the battle phase. Although the rivalry is entirely based on the manga that Van Dalgen came out of in Yu-Gi-Oh! R, in which Yugi special summoned Dalgon to destroy Tualatin. So definitely a really niche card, but interesting card with a bunch of different relationships to other cards in the game. And Van Dalgen's effect is not bad by any means. The main issue is that trap cards in general don't see much use outside of a couple of cards like Infinite Impermanence and Dimensional Barrier. And Counter Fairy decks are not really in the competitive space anymore. Next up is Doom Donut. This is a level 1 Dark Fiend monster with 0 attack and defense that has the flip effect to destroy all face-up monsters in the field with an original attack or defense of 0. Doom Donut is on this list because of its unique but weird effect. There's a pretty small group of cards that fit into the categories of monsters with original 0 attack or defense, but those monsters when used were typically game closers. Monsters like this summon to the field and then gain a bunch of attack points through their effects. But this doesn't just include monsters with 0 attack, because the effect also works on monsters with the infamous question mark as their attack point value, like Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess or Eater of Millions. So Doom Donuts is actually pretty effective against this small subset of monsters, which is cool and all, but the cards themselves that Doom Donuts is effective against don't see a lot of play outside of a couple of niche cards, and the ones that do can stop the effect, like Appaloosa. On top of that, flip effects in general have fallen quite out of favor due to how slow they are in nature. Not only burning up your normal summon for a card that just sits there for a turn, you then wait a full turn without your opponent destroying it or setting up a massive field to then activate the effect. Flip effects are unfortunately just too slow for the modern game and need some support to speed them up in one way or another. Like for example with Subterra Guru, which is a flip effect monster that has the effect that lets it search and reset itself, and has support cards that enable the flip effects even further. In old Yu-Gi-Oh!, when the game was played at a much slower pace, flip effect monsters were great and saw a lot of play because they had the best effects in the game at the time. But again, as the game got insanely fast and better effects were printed on non-flip monsters, there just isn't a place for flip cards with no support. Next up, we have Trial of Hail, or Trial of Nightmare. This is a simple level 4 Dark Fiend with 1300 attack and 900 defense, and is a normal monster with a flavor text that reads, "This fiend passes judgment on enemies that are locked in coffins." So what makes Trial of Hail so interesting is that it was one of the early cards that got censored in North American release. The original name of the card was Trial of Hell, but then it got changed to Trial of Nightmare later on. A lot of cards get changed when they make the translation to worldwide release. There are mainly 4 categories of artwork changes that include religious symbols like Exodia, violence/gore like Trial of Hell as well, guns or weapons like Barrel Dragon, or sexual content like Amazoness Queen. By far the biggest category is the religious symbols, with the best examples being Exodia, with the background of the card being changed from a pentagram to a spellbinding circle. Or the majority of cards with Dark Ruler Hades, who got his demonic horns changed to blue orbs. In the case of Trial of Hell, not only did the name get changed to Trial of Nightmare, but the artwork got changed too, so there wasn't blood coming out of the coffin. So comparing Trial of Hell to Archfiend Soldier, which has the same attribute and type, but has 1900 attack and 1500 defense, which is the standard for good vanilla level 4 monsters, you'll find that you can buy one for less than $1. But if you compare that to Trial of Hell, you'll see that you can buy at least 20 Archfiend Soldiers for the same price. This is because with the first North American release of the card, the name didn't get changed, but the artwork did. So the English version of Trial of Nightmare with the old name is an extremely rare card. With a PSA graded version of the card, the price can reach almost $200, which is pretty crazy to say the least. Next up in this video, we have the Gate Guardian. This was the first level 11 monster that was released and is a level 11 Dark Warrior monster that has pretty high stats of 3750 and 3400 defense, and can only be summoned by attributing one Sangha of the Thunder, Kazajin, and Suijin on your side of the field. Gate Guardian falls under the same category of Symbol of Friendship that we just talked about, in that Gate Guardian originally came from the anime with a super strong effect. Then when it came to the TCG, the card was notoriously bad, and that's how a lot of players know Gate Guardian, as one of the worst cards out there despite it being the non-extra deck warrior monster with the highest attack in the game, and the only monster in the game with a 3750 attack point value. An interesting thing about Gate Guardian's massive attack points is that it's equal to half the combined original attack of the 3 monsters that make up the Gate Guardian. Sangha has 2600 attack, Kazejin has 2400, Suijin has 2500, totaling at 7500 attack points. So dividing that by 2 is how you come with a pretty unique number of 3750. For its pretty high stat line, the summoning requirements really put a dent in the use of Gate Guardian. See, as the effect reads, the only way to get Gate Guardian on the field is to tribute 3 specific monsters, and the issue is that these 3 monsters are each a pain to bring out. Each are level 7 monsters that require 2 tributes each to bring out. So if you were to bring out Gate Guardian, you'd be losing 9 monsters all said and done, because each of the 3 parts that bring out Gate Guardian requires 2 tributes onto themselves, and then the monster itself being tributed, assuming you bring them all out the slow way. And even when you do bring out Gate Guardian, it doesn't really do anything. With such a strong summoning requirement, Gate Guardian has no effect that has any impact other than making summoning it a pain. It definitely is one of the worst cards out there. Unlike the 3 parts of Gate Guardian, with each of them having the effect that when the monster is targeted for an attack, as a quick effect you can make the attacking monster's attack become 0. And this effect was actually kind of decent, and let the pieces see some competitive play at Duel Links during its early years. But Gate Guardian's anime counterpart is the exact opposite, that being it's stupidly strong. Each of the different parts that make up Gate Guardian had multiple different effects. All 3 parts could be set like artifact cards, and would special summon themselves when the other 2 parts of Gate Guardian are on the field. Then, when it was on the field, you could just negate an attack that targets the card, and it wasn't a one-time only effect. Then Gate Guardian had the same summoning requirements, requiring all 3 tributes of Sangha, Kazejin, and Suijin, and then Gate Guardian has 3 attacks. During each battle phase, you can negate the attack of 1 monster with less attack than it, and on top of that, it had the unique effect that if it was destroyed, you can instead treat Gate Guardian as 2 of the above cards with their respective attack and defense. So the anime effect was certainly unique, and could pretty easily make it to modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's not broken by any means, given how much it takes to bring Gate Guardian out. But as for right now, it's quite the different story. Next, and the last card on our list that follows the theme of adapted anime cards is Jack's Knight. This is a level 5 light warrior door monster with 1900 attack and 1000 defense points, with a flavor text that reads, "A strong master swordsman. His loyalty is to justice, his duty to protect the weak." There isn't anything too special at first glance, with below average stats for a level 5 monster and no effect. So why is Jack Knight in the video? Well, there's some pretty cool lore to the card, as well as the archetype it's part of. See, Jack's Knight is part of the 3 Musketeers of Face archetype, and used to be one of the smallest archetypes in the game with only 3 core monsters and 4 boss monsters. But now, there have been a good couple of support cards that have come out during the recent years to expand their archetype. Cards like the monster Joker's Knight that can foolishly bury one of the Musketeers, copy its name, and recycle itself by shuffling another light warrior into the deck. And Joker's Straight, which is a spell card that for the cost of discarding 1 card, you can special summon a Queen's Knight from your deck, add either Jack's or King's Knights from your deck to your hand, and then immediately normal summon 1 additional time. And also has a similar recycling effect to Joker's Knight by shuffling a light warrior monster from your graveyard to your deck to add Joker's Straight back to your hand. The main group are all light warrior monsters that are based on traditional playing card faces, cards of Jacks, Queens, and Kings. So Jack's Knights is based off of the Jack's cards, Queen's Knights is based off of the Queen's cards, and King's Knight is also based on the King's cards. And the boss monsters are simply just evolutions of the Knights as they combine with a Joker card, or a combination of the 3 with a Royal Straight Slasher that is based off of a Royal Straight Flush in poker, which is a group of cards in poker that contain 5 cards as sequential rank, all of the same suite like a 10, Jack, Queen, King, and Ace of Hearts. What's interesting about the Musketeers of Face is that the King's Knight and Queen's Knights are both level 4, and King's Knight is the only monster to have an effect of the 3, which is to special summon Jack Knight from the deck when you normal summon King's Knight while controlling a Queen's Knight. But if Kings are a higher suit than Jacks, why is Jack's Knight higher level and have higher stats? Well, in a lot of different card games like Bella and Clabberjass, actually value the Jack higher than other cards like the King or Queen, and so Jack's Knight took some inspiration from that. With a pretty cool inspiration, who else would use the Musketeers of the Face in the anime? Well, of course it would be none other than the main character, Yugioh. Although his deck in the anime was pretty diverse with Dark Magicians and Exodia, in the Battle City arc, Yugi debuts the Musketeers of the Face in his deck to replace the hole that Exodia left. And Yugi has used the Musketeers of Face a lot throughout the anime and were pretty reliable cards. But what's interesting is that although Yugi used the Musketeers of Face cards, Jack's Knight, alongside the other Musketeers, didn't get a TCG release until the GX era in Elemental Energy. Jack's Knight also saw some competitive play in Monarch decks despite its subpar stats. Although it wasn't the most impactful card, as it was a garnet for most decks with Brilliant Fusion Engine, while also being a way to play around Rivalry of Warlords, which was a floodgate that only allowed you to control 1 type of monster. So at the time, there was the Brilliant Fusion Engine that almost all decks were using, because Brilliant Fusion, for little cost, got you a ton of advantage. Brilliant Fusion lets you summon a Gem Knight monster using materials from your deck. Typically, the monster you'd bring out is Gem Knight Seraph Knight because the effect allows you to have an additional normal summon, and Seraph Knight has a pretty cheap summoning cost. That being, you need a Gem Knight monster and any light attribute monster, and that's where Jack's Knights comes in. Basically, it was just fodder for Brilliant Fusion, but also could be used to pivot due to Rival of the Warlords effects. So, with Jack's Knight, which was a light warrior, and the main boss monsters of the deck being fairy and zombie types, Jack's Knight was a decent bridge because one of the main cards that you would tribute was Idea the Heavenly Squire, and Rivalry's effect only works with face-up monsters. So with Jack's Knight set, you can somewhat bypass Rivalry in order to go into your other Monarch cards. But this was back in 2016, and now that the Brilliant engine is not what it used to be, Jack's Knight hasn't seen much play. Alright, and that's the video. If there's any other cards you can think of that would be perfect for this series, please leave them down in the comments below.